Welcome to A Date with Darkness podcast, where I will be discussing the impact of hurtful and abusive relationships and how to overcome them so that you can move through your pain and get to the kind of healthy relationships you want, need, and deserve. I'm Dr. Natalie Jones. I'm a licensed psychotherapist based in California. While I hope that you find this podcast educational and informational, please note it should not be substituted for treatment with a licensed mental health professional. Also, due to the nature of the podcast, some of the information presented on the show can be sensitive to some of my listeners, so please note that listener discretion is advised. Hello and welcome back to the show. Have another wonderful installment of A Date with Darkness podcast for you today. And I'm super excited that you're here, and I'm super excited for the guest that's going to be on for the show as a returning guest. And I love guests that return because, they feel like family to the show, especially guests who were on, which this particular one was on, back when I first started this show, and now to the evolution. It's evolved into, I feel, almost like a different show altogether. So it's been a number of years since this guest has been on. So that's always nice and refreshing when we can have people come back on and revisit and chat with us. And of course, let's talk about the administrative stuff. If you are interested in individual or group coaching with me, please use the link down below in the show notes to sign up. If you want to subscribe to my newsletter, which goes out every Friday morning, please use the link down below or visit drnataliejones.com and download the free ebook, and you will automatically be signed up for the email list. And if you like what you hear, or you feel like this show has been helpful to you, your recovery process, or you know of someone that it could benefit, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. And if you could leave a wonderful review on iTunes, that would be great because that shows up on all the podcast players. And so that would really help this podcast continue to grow. And if you're on YouTube, definitely sign up for our channel because we're there now showing you all the wonderful videos of all the excellent guests that I now have on the show. All right, so welcome back again. Thank you so much for being here. And so today's guest that I have on is Shena Lachey. Shena is the creator and owner of the Black Girls Heal podcast and franchise, and she does a lot of wonderful work on love and intimacy disorders, especially for Black women. I so support what she's doing over there because it closely parallels the work that I do with this podcast, specifically on narcissistic abuse. And so I feel like a lot of those, there's a lot of parallels in between our bodies of work. And Shena has agreed to join us again, and it's such a pleasure. I was super excited when she agreed to come back on because I think her work is so wonderful and that she benefits a lot of people. And so for her podcast today, I feel like, we're going to definitely take a deeper dive into the intimacy disorders and how that shows up, why we struggle with those things, and what we can do about it. So without further ado, here is Shena Lachey and I. Hello and welcome to the show, Shena.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Excited to have you on. It's been a long time since you were on.
It's been a minute. Lot to catch up on,
It
lots to review. So I'm excited to jump
is.
in.
It is, and all good things. And you're always a friend of the show, so you're always welcome. And so, for folks who may not have heard you the first time you were on, or may not be familiar with your work, tell us who you are, what you do, and the passion behind what you do.
Yeah. So my name is Shena Lachey. I'm the founder of Black Girls Heal. And what I do at Black Girls Heal is I help women heal from the symptoms of love addiction, love avoidance, love deprivation, and the trauma that causes it to make way for healthy love in their life, primarily with themselves, but also with their other relationships. I am a therapist by trade. I've retired my license, but I was a licensed
Oh.
therapist for over a decade. Yeah, I officially did it, girl. It was hard to let it go. but it's no
I don't
longer active.
blame you. I don't blame
Yeah.
you. I'm thinking about doing that myself at some point. Yes, I don't blame you.
Yes. Yes.
40,
Yeah.
45 is the age in which I've determined for myself. 45. So there's
Okay. That's good. That's good. You know where it's coming. That's good to have that direction.
yes.
But yes, I was a therapist. You're so funny. I was I'm trying to be professional. You
yes.
cracking jokes.
Absolutely. Of course.
But I was a therapist for over a decade before I started coaching full time with Black Girls Heal.
Okay.
And I do it because I am a recovered love addict, and I
Mm.
am the woman that I've helped. And so I share my strength, hope, and also the tools I've created for my clients with my audience.
Okay, so tell us what a love addict is for folks that may not know.
Yes, ma'am. So a love addict is someone who deals with the persistent obsession of a person, a relationship, or the fantasy of who you want that person or relationship to be, and mistaking that intensity for love. So it's an over attachment to this partnership because of a fear that if it doesn't work out, that you'll be left out, that you'll be alone, that you'll be unloved, that this person or the fantasy of this person is the only one who can understand you. And a lot of times, as a love addict, you don't realize that you're in fantasy. You just feel like you understand it and see the person differently. You feel like you see the best in them, but you don't understand that you're actually seeing is a symptom of unhealed trauma. So love addiction, love avoidance, and love deprivation is just how we recreate trauma in our adult relationships. So with the love addict, we are attracted to people who are unavailable. So in a room of 100 people, we'll pick the person who may look nice and shiny on the outside. They don't always look grubby. They don't look, like they got stuff going on. They can be in a
Yeah.
suit and tie and love their mama. But it's the person who's not going to be there for us emotionally. They may work all the time. They may be
Mhm.
unfaithful, but we overattach
Mhm.
to who we think this relationship could be for us.
Okay. And what about a love avoidant versus love deprivation?
Yes. So love avoid and love deprivation are aligned. So they
Mhm.
both have the aspect of you put up walls. So you may want connection, but not really. You thrive on independence and freedom. Someone who's love avoidant, I'll go there first, really prioritizes their independence. And a lot of times the trauma that causes that is because you may have had a very intrusive caretaker or family background. So the intrusion could have been a narcissist, it could have been a
Mhm.
person who was an addict. It could have been someone who just had no emotional boundaries and they confided a lot of things into you as a little child that you shouldn't have known, that you were parentified and you had to take care of your siblings. But basically, to be in love and connection as a little girl, you learned that it was, or a little person, depending on who's listening.
Yeah.
But to be in love and connection is to be overwhelmed. So as an adult, you want connection, but not too much because you be damned if you get overwhelmed in that way. Now, the difference between a love avoidance and someone who's in love deprivation, because they both have those walls up and they both kind of struggle with relationships, is that someone who's love avoidant typically presents very functional. Is again, it's not always like I hate people. Sometimes they are CEOs and they're like super popular and they have lots of friendships, but they keep people at a distance. And a lot
Mhm.
of times that's why a love avoidant person doesn't realize that they're the common denominator because they can give you receipts on why these relationships aren't working out. They're like,
Mm.
well, I deserve more love this way, or I deserve a better friend. And so they're constantly cutting people out versus someone who's living in love deprivation has a very intense connection to self-loathing. They feel a lot of shame and they're aware of it. They don't feel worthy enough. They feel like if they try, it's not going to work out anyways. They have a deep sense of internal self-rejection, and that's why they push people away.
Mm. And with a love addict, do you feel like that is based on trauma as well as love avoidance and love deprivation?
Yeah, so they actually operate in the spectrum. That's a good question. People
Mhm.
ask me that all the time, like, oh, sometimes I feel like I do love addiction and I can't get enough of this person, but a lot of times I really don't like talking to people. And what at its core, at its core, we're just talking about intimacy disorders and
Yes.
meaning that it is hard for you to allow yourself to be seen and to show up in relationships.
Mhm.
And depending
Mhm.
on who's in front of you, you're going to switch the tactics subconsciously. You're not doing it on purpose.
Yeah.
So if I'm around someone who is healthy and available, they want to call me all the time, they want to hang out, and it's appropriate. But remember me, I'm used to when people get close, it's too much.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna find reasons to either talk about why I don't want to hang out with them, or I'm gonna be busy all the time.
Mm.
Versus when I meet someone else who is giving off all these subconscious signals of red flags, all of a sudden I'm enamored and I got all the time. And, I want to spend time around them and they get me more than anybody else gets me. And we have these 3-hour conversations about our background and it's just magic. But it's not. And so the
Mm.
trauma, to answer your question, the trauma that leads into love addiction
Mm.
is also, I don't think I said this actually, childhood emotional neglect.
Mm-hmm.
So not being attended to, not being heard, not being valued just for who you are. A lot of times, at least part of my story is I was very much valued when I was doing the right thing, when I was a good girl. So when I was making straight A's, when I was making them look proud, when all that stuff was in line. But you're not really given affirmation just because of who you are. And you're not given the opportunity to fail and still be enough. And so as a love addict, you have that hole of not feeling enough, of not feeling loved, of not feeling valued. So when you meet somebody who feels like they fill that hole and they see that in you, and if they're giving off these subconscious cues of that mimic the people who abandoned you, it's like catnip. It's exactly what you needed,
Mm-hmm.
But again, you don't have words for it, and you don't think that's what's happening when you're in it until you kind of look back and you see the patterns.
Absolutely. And for me, it sounds very similar to attachment wounding.
Exactly. Yes. So I got into, so we're both therapists, right? So of course, we both learn about attachment disorders and all
Yes.
that stuff, right?
Yes.
And I knew all that before I got into recovery for sex and love addiction. So I was
Mm.
introduced to 12-step programs. Well, what made it so unique for me, and I think what's made it so unique for the people that I serve and why I use this language, is because no one really put to words the intensity of the obsession and the attachment that happens to these people in relationships.
Mm.
You literally go through symptoms of withdrawal when you are in love addiction. So panic attacks, inability to eat. So all the things that people have whenever they go through breakups, breakups
Yeah.
suck for everybody.
Yeah.
But the suicidal thoughts, love addicts will stalk. Love addicts will ruminate and not be able to get out of bed for an extended period of time. Love addicts will keep going back to relationships that are toxic and abusive to them, um,
Mm.
even when they logically know it's not better. And again, for those of us who present very well, it could be the area of our life that we're like, why the hell? I have common sense in every other area of my life. Why is it with this? I feel like I'm so out of control,
Yes.
right? Which is one of the symptoms of
Yeah.
addictive disorders.
Yes.
So yes, there's definitely they're attached for sure.
With those addictions, neurochemically, there's
Mhm.
usually been found to be some sort of science behind addiction. Do you know if that's the same also with love addiction?
There is, and I've never been able to talk about it clearly. So I'm going to try. But yes, there's definitely research around the impact of cortisol and the stress hormones and PEA that is disseminated whenever you're around your addictive person and how that substitutes a lot of the ways that you may be deficient. If you have trauma that does not allow you to be present or doesn't allow you to be grounded and engage in pleasure, because you're very much in your fight or flight response, whenever you are with this person that bridges that gap, is that's how they become the substitute for that. But yeah, I'm not gonna act like I did not get a doctorate
And yeah, well,
in the
that's
neurochemistry.
okay. And I won't take it down to like the hypothalamic pituitary axis and cortisol. Like we won't get into that because that stuff
Yeah,
gets to be a lot for just even the listener. But from what
yeah,
you're saying, I think the gist of what you're saying is there is a neurochemical reason for it. It's not just which we kind of we may get down on ourselves. It's not just the logical, like, let me, why can't I just stop because I want to stop. It's something actually neurochemically that's happening to make you want to bind to that toxic situation. And I think that's very similar to, like, narcissistic abuse and any other attachment injury, is where it's like, a lot of people who kind of do these things or get caught up in these relationships, their brain has sort of developed to react a certain way. You've been groomed to, or that's been your childhood exposure. And so you were raised that way. And so you're definitely, you can be hardwired, which is
Right.
why, it's so hard to stop, even though logically, you should. It's like you can't really
Yeah.
get out of that sort of feedback loop.
Yeah. I mean, it's normalized, it's imprinted on your system, which is
Yes.
why for you, going with narcissism, right? If you meet someone who ends up to be a narcissist, all of the red flags that someone else can see feels commonplace to you. It's like, oh, that wasn't really a thing. You're making that up. Or if you do see it, you think as a child of a narcissist, oh, I can handle it. I
Hmm.
know how to work with this, or I'll just stay mindful of my boundaries and all the
Yeah.
things we tell ourselves to try to rationalize what's happening versus what I think happens when you start to heal is that the things that happened to you as a child should have never happened in the first place. You should have never had to be in a place where you had to become so resistant to the impact of narcissistic abuse. And it's not normal. It might have been common, but it's not normal and it's not okay. So it's
Hmm.
not that you stay in this relationship and just do your best to gird your loins and stay mindful, is that you deserve to be in a healthy, easy, committed, long-term relationship if that's what you want, but not all the games and manipulation and abuse that happens with a narcissist.
Absolutely. And it's not so easy to just kind of, pick up and get into that. And so with that being
Yeah.
said, with love addiction, love avoidance, and love deprivation, um, given what we're talking about, sort of the brain and how that works, is it um how easy is it to learn to become secure or non-addicted or non-avoidant?
Ooh, how easy is it? It ain't. It ain't. Is it possible? That question, yes, it absolutely is possible. But
Okay.
the reason why it's not easy is because there's a lot of, dark nights of the soul you have to wrestle with. First of all, what I
Mhm.
just said is usually one of the most painful revelations and epiphanies that people have to come to, because what that involves you having righteous anger that you may have been repressing towards your parents.
Mhm.
Even if you said, I'm angry, once you actually start to replay the things that happened as a healthy adult, looking at 3, 4, 5-year-old you who went through this, there's even more anger and rage that comes up. So a lot of people don't want to experience that. And when they do, they feel sad. They feel guilty if they love their parents. They
Yeah,
feel the mourning because they wish they should have had something different and it's not fair. There's a lot of stuff that happens there.
absolutely.
Then there's the lack of belief that you are worthy. I mean, you, like you said earlier, you're hardwired to believe that you have to earn love. It's a foreign concept. You hear this all the time, people saying that you're worthy and you're valuable. And it's one of those things that you're like, I get it, but I just can't, I don't, I have no idea what you're talking about. Like, you
Mhm.
know? Um, so unlearning those things and replacing it with different scripts and different narratives, and then also putting the actions behind it. Um, I was actually, I've said this on my podcast and to my clients too. Even me in my personal therapy, I was working on something with my therapist, and we kept coming back to it. And finally, I got to a place where I was like, I think, like, I ran out of excuses to not think that I was worthy enough. Like I was kind of like, well, maybe if I work on this, then I'll be good enough, and maybe I'll work on this. And I just had to go and do all those things until finally I was like, I think I'm good enough. And she was like, yeah, you've always been good enough. And she
Mhm.
talked about how it's a habit. A lot of the times it's not even, when you get to a certain place, it's not even about looking for the trauma, but you're so used to being self-critical. You're so used to looking for the negative thing that's going to happen and being hyper vigilant, that you have to start to create new habits of expecting the best, of being optimistic, of
Mhm.
of choosing praise and self-compassion for yourself before looking for how you failed, and giving yourself that tough love. Um,
Mhm.
so that's also part of the process.
And I also wonder, too, if it's harder to for Black women or women who are, people of color, because, it's and I don't know if you ever got this when you were younger from your parents, but I got that the talk at a very early age. I got the three negatives. So you have the three negatives. I have, I'm hearing disability, I'm a woman, and I'm a black woman on top of everything else. So therefore I have to work double, triple, quadruple times as hard to prove myself. And so I think even with women sort of hearing that narrative, and everyone's narrative is a little bit different, but just also like how hard that we try to show up, or we have to work to try to show up. I think that there's like that extra layer to that.
Yeah, yeah. I'm so happy you said that. So I think about, well, I want to say this before I lose it. I think when we were growing up, because we're both millennials, I
Mm-hmm.
think when we were growing up, I could easily say with full confidence that to be a Black American person, this is what parenting in a household looked like. It looked critical, it looked like shame, it looked like emotional repression,
Mm-hmm.
emotional neglect, even if they were present. And it was just commonplace. I mean, we see when every year, twice a year, when the whole like growing up in a Black household, when those memes resurface on social media, like we
Mm-hmm.
see the common threads. But I'm so happy to say that I don't think that that is currently the trend for the families and
Yes.
children that are coming up because of how we're all doing the work. And we're intentionally trying to parent and communicate and love ourselves differently. So I'm really excited for the little Black children, Black and brown children growing up that are going to get something different than we got, and to see how it impacts them. But yeah, your question about culturally, how does this affect us as Black women, or what is the impact? I think what I just mentioned, growing up in households that are kind of primed for us to be seen, not heard, for we have
Mm-hmm.
to be a certain age to earn the right to have an opinion, the right to be respected as a person, and even then, maybe not, because there are elders. Um, and that is just narcissism is normalized, and also not even that narcissism is normalized, but you know, narcissism is also generational trauma. So our parents were being parented the way that they were parented, and it's just passed down, right? So there's that. Then also us to survive, having to work harder. So having to take on this workhorse bull mentality to protect ourselves because we feel so unprotected in so many other areas,
Mm-hmm.
that we're scapegoated, that we're forgotten, that we're both penalized while also being praised for being so strong. Like, you don't need my help, you're so strong, or you're so strong, you don't need my help. It's like, which one is it? Like where do you want me to be? And so again, I think in this generation and these societies, culturally where we're going right now, is we have a lot of people having these mirror moments when we're trying to figure out, okay, this is what I've been taught, and maybe this is what has helped me be successful. But this is how I want to live my life. Do I actually want to live my life through hustle and grind
Mm-hmm.
and stress? Does stress need to be my normal? And
Mm-hmm.
I was talking with some people that I work with about heart conditions, and it was such a surprising conversation because I was talking about high blood pressure and how
Mm.
I've been trying to get my normalized and everything.
Same
And I
here.
casually mentioned how my mom died from congestive heart failure.
Oh
And
wow.
then another woman said, mine did too. And another one said, mine did too.
Wow.
And it was like, and I'm also dealing with it too. And these were all young deaths, like around their 50s and so. And it made me think about how when my parents were first diagnosed with high blood pressure, I didn't blink. I was just like, of course we all have high blood pressure. We're Black. Like
It's
that's just part of
normalized. Mm-hmm.
normalized. Versus maybe we shouldn't be dying from this silent killer. Maybe we don't have to live lives that are so stress induced, and we can do something differently. And maybe that's the rebellion. Not that we're trying to be heard in a boardroom, even though that's great, and not just laws being changed, but that we take our power back within our homes and we actually have full lives, and that people can't take from us in that way.
Mm. That's a good point. I mean, in just there's often parallels and When I work with people who've been victims of narcissistic abuse and even attachment disorders, because a lot of people sometimes get narcissistic abuse and attachment wounding confused because there's some similarities, but they're still very different. And it's so interesting, just like you said, there you could see almost like the ripple effect in how it shows up in every cornerstone of your life, through your health, through your relationship with money, through your job, through how you just manage your day to day, and just being able to even hold or sit with emotions and things like that. It's so interesting how this just shows up in every aspect of your life. So I think it's a much deeper than just a psychological construct. Um,
Yes. It's
so
holistic. It's a complete transformation of how we see ourselves and see each other and see our bodies and see what we deserve and see what we even eat. I mean, girl, it's hard work, but it's worth it, I think.
Absolutely. And even one of the things that I didn't think about until recent was energetic, and
Mm,
I had went to go have Reiki done. And I'm like, oh, I have, because going back to what you were saying, you were talking about the anger and stuff a moment ago. Well, if you have
yeah.
people that have been in abusive relationships, and I've certainly had my fair share,
Yeah.
anger is not an emotion that I feel. And I didn't realize
Mm,
that until recently. Like, emotionally, I don't get angry. I may get annoyed, I may get frustrated, but anger has not ever been something that I externalize, and that's not healthy. And it's
yeah.
also not common, but that's just me. Like, and I even gotten angry with myself over not being able to get angry, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's an energy thing. And so I
Yeah.
found out, like, just going to see a Reiki practitioner, like, just letting go of like certain energy so that you
Yeah.
could just sort of function, because even that, I think, has something to do with it as well.
Yeah. Oh my God. Oh, good. What you just said was so good. Okay. I have a couple of thoughts. I'll say about the energy first.
Yeah.
Something that I missed when I said, we could describe the Black household 20, 30 years ago was probably very common. One of the
Mhm.
things that I missed was being culturally Christian, either really Christian or culturally Christian.
Mm.
I did not grow up in a culturally Christian home or in the church, but I did in college get saved and, like, go through be in ministry and all the stuff that comes with that. And so you learn, if that's part of your background, that anything outside of the Bible and Christ is evil,
Mhm.
and you're not open to it. And part of my healing has been, for me, and this is me speaking personally, of course, me learning about the bigness and expansion of God, and also seeing that these core tenets of energy and faith are common in all these places
Mhm.
because they're common truths, right? And
Mhm.
so learning about Reiki and even crystals and some other things that
Yes.
provided me so much relief and healing has been so freeing for me.
Yeah.
And of course, everybody's path is different, but I needed to learn that. Um,
Mhm.
and then I want to say something about emotions. So I laugh because one of the things that I unexpectedly learned this last year was that I was repressing my emotions, which made no sense to me because
Mhm.
I talk about my emotions all the time. I am able to eloquently share how sad I am, why I'm sad, where I feel it, what I want to do next. And so when I started to get feedback that I wasn't feeling my emotions, I was like, I don't understand what you're saying. But
Mhm.
it was because I was intellectualizing it and
Mhm.
thinking about them, but I wasn't actually feeling it in my body.
Mhm.
And so there was all this anger that came up there because I'm like, if I was in therapy and I was out of control with my emotions, my therapist would want me to get to the place that I am right now. So what is this? Why do I need to go
Yes.
and work backwards? But I didn't I didn't know what I didn't know. And so once I started to get present, and you could probably relate to this too by what you're sharing, is um, it really did unlock the door for me to experience the robustness and depth of all these emotions.
Nice.
So I actually started crying more. and
Oh,
not just saying I was sad, but actually crying and crying very easily at things.
yeah.
And I had to get over like initial embarrassment because I'm like, not even that I'm embarrassed to cry or that I was embarrassed to cry, but like, I know, like, in the grand scheme of things, it's not that big a deal, whatever I said at the time. But just learning yourself in a different way. Um, this healing process is ain't for the weak.
It
It's
is
for all of
not
us.
for the weak. I tell my therapist that every single week because I see mine weekly, and I'm like, one of these days, I'm going to come in here and say everything is fine and I don't need you anymore. But we haven't gotten there yet.
And then she's gonna twist it around. You'll be crying in 6 seconds. Yeah, good old therapist.
Absolutely. And I totally get that from one crier to another. Like yeah, I'm very super sensitive. And so, yeah,
Yeah,
I totally get that. One of the things I was listening to your podcast, your most recent podcast, which I love, and I recommend that everyone who's not listening to it go listen to it. But you had talked a lot about, losing yourself in a relationship. And given what we're talking about here, not being able to feel or be in touch with your feelings and your emotions, energy and love addiction, love avoidance, love deprivation, tell us how we get lost in relationships with people. I have some thoughts, but I'd love to hear what yours are.
yeah. So, in the realm of love addiction, my thought process comes at going back to the trauma of just the emotional neglect of not being seen as an individual person. A lot of times, as love addicts, we are very good at becoming chameleons and becoming whoever the person in front of us needs us to be.
Mm,
And we're also very good at being flexible,
mm,
and we're also very good at being accommodating. So when we meet someone whose story and their image and their energy feels like something that feels good that we could try on, we're like, okay, great. I will just hop into that. But it's because we don't have our own identity already established. We
mm-hmm.
kind of know what we like, but do we actually know what we like? We kind of feel like we know what we want to do, but we're easy to drop that if we meet the right person.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like we have our life on standstill on hold until we meet the right person. And so one of the things that I really try to encourage people to do, if that's something that they feel, and usually this is a lot easier to do once they're out of the relationship, because when they're in the relationship, they're very devoted to making it work. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll support them wherever they are. But when they're out, um, really digging into what do you do for fun? What is something that you like? And so what hobbies do you have? And 9.999 times out of 10, they don't have any hobbies.
Mm.
And the closest thing that they can come up with is that they like to exercise and they like to travel. And those are great things to do, but those are not hobbies.
They're not.
And they're like, well, I don't understand. And so I'm like, well, let me say it this way. How do you play? And they're like, play? What does that mean? And going back to this being a trauma response, when we think about the 3, 4, 5-year-old version of ourselves that didn't get a chance to be free and play and explore, the part of us that didn't get a chance to dance and like no one's watching, to draw and color outside the lines, to sing as loud as she wanted to create,
Mm.
that part of you. What was the thing that you always wanted to do but you didn't have a chance to, or you did but you left it when you met certain people who beat it out of you emotionally or physically, that you didn't have time for anymore?
Mm.
Where do you find your pleasure? Because if you do not know how to get pleasure on your own, that person you're attached to becomes your hobby. They become your access to pleasure, which is another reason why it's so hard. I mean, when we talk about separating from someone from love addiction, it's not just the person, it's everything that they meant to us.
Yes.
They literally were our freedom. They literally were our safety, our comfort, because we didn't know how to have access to any of that ourselves. So it's so painful.
Wow. Wow. And so they become your source of validation
Absolutely.
also. Is it possible that if you were a well-rounded person with hobbies, that you do kind of get caught up in that as well? Because I heard you mention usually they don't have hobbies, but is it also
Yeah.
true for people that even if they have a well-established identity or they have things, is it possible a person would be like, "Oh, well, let me just stop what I'm doing and just
Yeah.
make this relationship my priority."
Yeah, yes, especially when we talk about narcissism. Um,
Yeah.
if that kind of narcissistic charm and wooing is still normal in the back of your mind and you don't see it for what it is, a
Mm-hmm.
narcissist will slowly start to drain and plant themselves in these different places of your life. And before you know it, they will become like
Everything.
your source. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
everything. And I feel
Hmm.
like even with addiction, like when you have the love addiction, um, you tell me if what you think I'm saying is wrong, but I feel like with love addiction, love avoidance, or even love deprivation, even if you attract someone, a lot of times you attract the same elements that you possess, right? You attract a person that has the same elements. Now, for example, if you're a love avoidant and you attract an anxious person,
Hmm.
there's, for me, I feel like there's so many parallels. Even though it manifests in anxiety, I still feel like avoidance is an anxiety, but it's an extreme. And so I feel like you guys are just mirroring each other,
Yeah.
but
Hmm.
there's a lot of it's just an extreme way of which you're sort of mirroring each other, and I think they pretty much still lack intimacy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, the yin finds the yang, for sure. And the more anxiously attached finds the person who's more detached. And then when the anxiously attached person pulls away, then now the avoidant is like, "Where are you going?" And then they just repeat that cycle.
Mhm.
But to your question about you attract who you are, I think I think a year or so ago I would have absolutely agreed with the way that you
Yeah,
said it,
right.
but just me personally, I'm starting, and not because it doesn't make sense, but I've I've started to listen differently to some of the things my clients have said, words that I've said, like you attract who you are. And even if I'm trying to say it in a way that's supportive to them, it still has an air of shame, like there's something wrong with
Absolutely.
you, you're
Yeah.
doing something bad, right? So
Yeah.
I'm still trying to figure out the language around, it's not that you attract certain people, because there's narcissists and unhealthy people around you every day, just like there's healthy
Absolutely.
people around you every
Yeah,
day. But it's
absolutely.
more you are, I can't think of a different word, but it's just normal. So you
Wired.
are more
Yeah,
familiar and
wired.
comfortable with
Mm-hmm.
certain energies. Yeah, you're more wired, so you're
Yeah.
more familiar and comfortable with certain energies, and those are the people that you are attracted to versus you're a magnet for these people. So sometimes I tell a story, and I might even said it on the last podcast. I tell the story of how when I was still deep in my love addiction, I went to a brunch cafe with a girlfriend of mine, and we were talking about relationship problems, and or my relationship problems because she was married. But she was like, "Okay, so Sheena, who in this cafe do you find attractive?" And she had no background in love addiction, but she just asked me the question, and she said, and I looked around and I pointed out a couple guys. I really didn't see anyone I found attractive, but I picked out a couple. And then she said, "Well, Sheena, what about that one over there in the yellow? And what about that one over there? And what about that one?" And Natalie, when I tell you I didn't even see those men, like literally, they did not exist until she pointed them out. And I really think that there is a fog that like I really think that
Yeah,
we are attuned more to certain people
we
than others
are.
until we start to heal this part of ourselves.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
Now
Yes.
when I meet a narcissist, I get the charm and the love bombing. And before it used to be seductive, and now it's like, ew. Like I'm still attuned to it. It just has a different connotation.
Absolutely. And I
Mhm.
certainly agree with you there. And it's something that if you're hardwired for it, like what we've been talking about,
Mhm.
it's something that you'll consistently have to work on. I had a lady on, oh goodness, Dr. Christiane Northrup. She wrote the Energy Vampires book. She talked
Okay.
about an experience very similar to what you shared. And
Hmm.
she's like, she could go in a room full of people and she's only going to be attracted to that one personality. And so now it's like, before she even starts to date anyone, she has to they have to go through this like rigorous check through her friends just to double check herself.
Oh my God. And that, that is something that I'm also wrestling with. I'm so happy you said that, because there's a couple schools of thought, and I think they all have points. So sometimes you have to be mindful of running your relationships through friends, because sometimes either they're off or you don't want to fall into not being able to think for yourself. And if this is a pattern that you have, that you miss red flags, you need a community to hold you
For
accountable
sure.
to
For
see what
sure.
you're missing.
For
So finding
sure.
that balance is hard.
For sure. And I could not agree with you more. Just having, and I think that's something you should have anyway. Like if we grew up learning how to date and learning how to make friends in a healthier manner from a
Yeah,
healthier construct, that's what healthy people do anyway.
right,
Securely attached or emotionally healthy people do
exactly.
anyway, in terms of just having your tribe meet each other and vet
Right,
for help you vet and things like that.
right.
So I know it's been a fabulous talk, but we're at the end. Can you believe
Oh, whoa, okay.
it? Right? It went so fast. It
Time
went so
flies.
fast. It does.
Okay.
It does, right? So tell the people how they can find you, all the fabulous things that you're working on, and what
Yeah.
we can support you with.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, like I said, the name of my platform is Black Girls Heal, and
Mhm.
you can follow me on Instagram at Black Girls Heal, on TikTok at Black Girls Heal, and Facebook as well.
Nice.
And our website is blackgirlsheal.org. And if you would like to work together, my signature program is called the Recovery School, and I'm actually launching a self-healing track. So I've had different tracks over the years, but I'm launching a version where you can walk through it and unlearn the symptoms of love addiction, love avoidance, and love deprivation on your own. So looking forward to launching that.
Loving that. Loving that. So is that the only fabulous thing you're going to work on? Tell us about that you're
Oh,
working on.
I have, well, now I got a million things. Okay, so what else? I mean, we have books on Amazon for
Oh,
those who want to
wow.
build that tribe and community. I call them healing circles. And
Nice.
there's a foundation book, and you can come together with friends. I know women who come together with their mother, with their sisters, with their neighbors, and talk about concepts of forgiveness, of self-love, and helping you go deeper in these intimate topics. And it leads you also in how to hold support for people without dominating, and also without speaking up for what you need. We have a mindfulness coloring book on Amazon. And coming soon, I am also going to be launching live coaching on YouTube. So I have
Ooh.
primarily, the reason why I'm doing the self-discovery or the self-healing track is because I'm closing the group coaching program
Oh,
portion, because I want to be more available to coach people live. I've just seen over the last 4 or 5 years how women get it, and how it just feels so different for them when they can hear me lead other women through a process
nice.
that they have a lot of alignment with. And so I'll be doing that more on YouTube. So people can sign up for that spot by going to blackgirlsheal.org/heart,
Ooh.
and I'll lead you through. It's called a heart-to-heart consultation. So I'll lead you and coach you through whatever you want to work.
Oh, I love that. That sounds amazing. You're doing great things. Thank you so much, Sheena. It's always a
Thank
pleasure talking to you. All right, everybody. So you just heard the interview with me and the lovely Sheena Lachey. Just a quick note that I wanted to make during the interview when I talked to Sheena, and I was mentioning that we are what we attract. I was specifically referring to the attachment disordered spectrum, and not narcissistic abuse specifically, or any abusive relationship. So I just wanted to clarify that before we close out the session. Just listening back, I heard how it may have sounded, so I wanted to clarify that, as that is what we were talking about at the time. So would love to know what your thoughts were on this episode, and how it resonated with you. And I just love talking to Sheena and just seeing her evolution with the Black Girls Heal platform is such a wonderful platform. And until next time, you guys take care of yourselves and be well. Check out the sneak preview of next week's episode.
Yeah, I hear different philosophers and psychologists, we all define friendship differently. So I'll tell you what definition I'm working with.
Sure.
And that is, I always say, three facets of what I think would be healthy to include when defining a friend. One, you know each other. I know that sounds obvious, but you know each other. There's reciprocity and there's affection. And I say that because, especially with women, sometimes we are driven by the chemistry we feel. A
Mhm.
lot of us are familiar with the concept of fast friends, and we're like, oh my God, I feel like I've known her forever. And I think that feeling might be a great catalyst to launch into a friendship. It is
Mm.
not a friendship because there's no time that has passed for me to test her character. And not that we should be putting our friends through a test, but we haven't had enough experiences to reveal her character, her commitment, our compatibility. I haven't seen enough yet.